Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we'll be discussing Chapter 2 of Freemasons for Dummies, From Cathedrals to Lodge Rooms, A History of the Freemasons.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual very worshipful brother, David Colbeth, a member of King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243 in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And our usual third, Steve Chung, couldn't be here this evening, but he's not feeling so well. We hope he recovers soon. But we have in his stead our brother Craig Graham, who is a member of a lodge in Vernon, British Columbia, Kalamaka Lodge number 160. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've been looking forward to doing something like this for quite some time.
Well, we're happy to have you. The Steve has mentioned your name a couple of times, and he said, oh, I know just the guy. So you come well recommended.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Steve isn't here, so you know.
I got shouted out on this podcast one day, and that was kind of a thrill. So it was the first time in my life anything like that had ever happened. So it's all good. Like I say, I'm just happy to be here and happy to lend my 2 cents where they're asked for.
Well, you're very welcome. We'll have to do a pod sometime where we'll give you a proper interview and
okay.
Learn your Masonic history and such. But for today, we will talk about Chapter 2 here. So I will confess right up at the front, I did not finish the chapter in my reading. So please, all of our listeners, I apologize. But frankly, there's so much meat here that I almost feel like there's plenty to discuss for many episodes. There's the chapter sort of starts out with the time immemorial version of Masonry and trying to figure out where everything started. And well, I left off in about the 1800s, but is this the one where there's a list of podcasts in the chapter?
No.
I opened the book the other day just to a page and there was a list of Masonic podcasts, and I thought, why aren't we on there? But
little too soon.
Yeah.
Well, I guess your version, although you had the new version though. So when was the newest one published?
I don't know, but I can tell you.
Because mine, I think, was 2012-ish or something. So I'm 10.
This is 22.
Okay.
Wow. We're recording with that.
We'll have to have a conversation with Mr. Hodap.
We'll have to write Chris Hodap a nasty note. So anyway, what did you guys think of David was saying earlier in the Blue Room that I come up with a pithy question to start things off, and I got nothing this time. What did you guys think of the chapter? It starts, I'm glad that when he starts with the differentiating between the sort of legendary romantic version of Masonic history and the what we can actually prove historical version of Masonic history. Yeah. What did you guys think of that conversation? What was the upshot of that for you?
For me, I thought this easily could have been divided into 2 chapters, at least, maybe even 3. I mean, right in the beginning, he has kind of that separate outline in this chapter. He's got 6 different bullet points, and easily I think he could have cut that off. And there's kind of like the true history of Masonry and then kind of the modern history of Masonry. I thought that could have easily separated. And then the next, as we get into a little bit, the first part of it kind of reminds me of the begats in the Bible. It's a lot of this and then this and then this and then this queen died and king killed her and all this. Anyway, there's a lot of that going on.
I think he definitely takes a very practical view of it, which is good, especially for people that are picking this up that are not really familiar with with the subject of Freemasonry in general. Because as you guys both well know, there's a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down if you get into this. And I remember over the years of especially as books were published at different times with wildly different theories of where we came from. The Michael Bajents of the world and Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Robinson's book about another one about the Templar origin story and whatnot. A lot of like I said, just a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down, and sort of takes you a while to emerge from them. And I think Hodap's idea is just more like, okay, well, let's kind of work with what we can prove first of all, but just in case, here's other ideas about where we might have come from, and he doesn't go too far into it without so we don't get trapped in it.
Yeah, I appreciated that he got into the history of what masonry was, that what Masons were about, and how they were so revered, and they were more, essentially more intelligent even than the kings and those of importance. But those in authority knew that they were that important, so they had to maintain them and keep them close. So it was interesting how that was adopted.
So it makes sense then, where he talks about how we get our recognition, how we get you sort of things you hear in lodge about, when so that I may travel and work in foreign countries, and you understand where that, we extract that from this history. One little thing, I'd never realized what the origin of the term Cowan was until he explained it in the chapter, and I thought that was a very, very, it's just one of those things. I thought maybe that was just a term that was thrown out in the ritual, but to actually look at what the definition of it is according to him, and how it balances out against the proper form of masonry is quite something.
For our listeners' benefit, do you want to go into that a little, Craig?
Yeah. So he says that we're guarding against the approach of Cowans and eavesdroppers, and of course in the book here he describes the Cowans were referred to as the very roughest, and I mean the very most untrained of masons, the guys that basically piled the stones to build walls in fields and things like that, and that they were not allowed near the really technical work that went on when they were building the cathedrals and other great works like that. So it's something again that I'd never known about, but one of those little moments you sort of stop and think for a minute when you pick it up in the book.
I missed that entirely. So apparently,
yeah, the less knowledgeable of the Masonic group of the Masons at the time, right? So they're not only were there in section on Gothic architecture, I underlined the part that says the common folks couldn't even read. And so the things that they were building and the things they had created, the stained glass windows and the thousands of stone carvings and everything, those were built so that that story could be told around the history and the Bible stories and the historic information. Because people couldn't read back then, right? And it's
no, even probably a lot of our ancient brethren themselves. And it's certainly with that visual storytelling, you see reflections of that in the way that we instruct in our inside lodge still, with certain things we use and the way that things are explained. So there's a long history of that very sort of that visual form of the passing on of meaning.
I'm trying to remember. There's a book I read. I want to say it's called The Pillars of Heaven, but that might not be it. It was a book. It's a thick one. It's a fictional novel about the building of a cathedral in England in the sort of, I guess, the early Gothic period.
Yeah, I roughly know what you mean. The author wrote a whole. It was well-known book at the time. Very well received.
Yeah, I liked the book a lot. It's really good, but I mean, again, it's fictional, but it goes into a lot of the guy who was laying out the cathedral and how he gave instructions to his workers. It was very detailed, and talked about how he would draw things in like the sand, and then he would cast plaster over them to have designs for the to tell the workers, this is where you need to put this stone kind of thing. And it was really fascinating. And yeah, again, I think maybe he could read, but basically no one else on the worksite could read. So transmitting this information from person to person was a challenge.
Rather primitive version.
Uh-oh, we lost Craig.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you are.
No, I'm still here. As I was saying, a rather primitive version of AutoCAD, I think, is what that.
Yeah, he does talk about how that essentially was a critical factor in how once they no longer needed to be able to decipher the ideas and the concepts of geometry and and building and craftsmanship, that's when that became a little bit less desired, less needed.
It was The Pillars of the Earth. That was the name of the book. Sorry, Ken Follett, The Pillars of the Earth.
Okay. Yeah,
it is neat to see how he ties in the terminology as well. You know, the craft being that's what we call it internally.
It's interesting. I've been in England, and I haven't been any of the great cathedrals, but I've certainly been in some of the older churches where all of that architecture you can see on a smaller scale. And it's kind of, when you step back and you think about the knowledge you would have needed to just to conceive and build of something like that, how to instruct other people to carry out that work, or where you went and found them, and then trying to stay on budget over the 150 years that it often took to build those cathedrals as well. You know, many of the largest ones in Europe haven't even been finished. It just took so long, and they just did the work stopped, and they did different things at different times, and it's amazing to think about how that process all came about.
You know, they're generational works. I mean, he mentions that they start as young as 12 and would work their way through the ranks of apprentice and into fellow, and eventually maybe become masters. But that was a very select group.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, he talks about, I mean, one of the things he talks about, which I've heard several different theories on, was the origin of the actual word Freemasonry, whether it was the people who were able to move about the country freely because of their job skills, or if it was the free stone that they carved, or if it was because I heard a third one somewhere else. It was like that they were free. They weren't necessarily, wasn't the stone so much as the work that they were doing was perhaps more ornamental and wasn't supportive. So it was
free-handed,
free masonry kind of thing. That's because they were making whatever gargoyles that were not important to the structure kind of thing, which I don't like that theory, but for what that gets you.
Yeah. Kind of like freehand work, basically, or free. Yeah.
But yeah, that's another one of those things that I always kind of wonder a little bit about.
But I guess in the what he's trying to do is, and he threads it together fairly well in this chapter, is looking at where that, the medieval guilds, and maybe even a bit earlier than that, and then how we came from there to where we are now, and then how we sort of go back in time a little bit here and there, and add some of our own mythology to it. We certainly have the stories we tell, and the way we instruct certain things that where those influences were sort of inserted through the centuries as well. It's like I said, he takes a very pragmatic approach to it, and it makes for easy reading. If you're not,
I generally appreciate that too, because some of those things do get pretty far out there.
Yeah. Like I said, rabbit holes, and the esoteric side of this fraternity. We won't address that here, but that's that. Like I said, how did we get from there to where we are now?
Well, it really does strike home the idea of proficiency. We've talked about that all the time. We talk about it all the time. Almost every show, it seems like we get something in there about proficiency and quality and that kind of thing. And to be a true Mason, to build these kind of buildings and these kind of structures, you had to have that ability. And so they'd work for years on their proficiency. And, we talk about some people getting a 1-day degree and becoming proficient in masonry in a day. Really? Even my journey was about a year. And could I have said I was proficient? Not based on what are the standards I might consider now.
No, I would say myself, I was a little more than a year when I joined in the early 90s, and I felt a little rushed at times too. And then you still, here it is. Now you spend a lifetime trying to figure it out.
And maybe that's some of the point.
Yeah.
What is proficiency? Is it a particular thing, or is it a journey? Yeah.
I think if you look at our ancient brethren, though, the ones that worked on the cathedrals, you'd certainly understand that for us, failure in an examination in a lodge might be a tisk moment. Back 1,000 years ago, that was failure was a little more catastrophic. It meant the flying buttresses were collapsing, and 90 years of work had to be started all over again.
Yeah.
Yep. I was thinking the exact same thing. Yep. So he does talk a bit about tell me if I'm skipping too far ahead here, but he talks a bit about like the Regis manuscript, which is one of those things I always tell myself I'm going to read, but apparently it's in Appendix A in plain English. So I'm actually getting around to reading it this time. Have you guys, I'm just out of curiosity, have you ever read it, or is it a...
No, like you, I keep meaning to get around to it. It is in the back of the third edition here, and it is in plain English with something of a rhyming scheme to it. So it's something you're going to have to read through about 2 or 3 times to kind of get. I guess this thing sort of being like your college level notes book for Freemasonry. It'll help. And there's I've been familiar with the manuscript for a long time. I guess it's at its heart, it's a series of instructions with a little bit of a constitutional element to it, but it doesn't. It's like reading the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner for the first time, or an Allen Ginsberg poem. It's like, okay, what did I just read? And maybe I should go back over this again.
Yeah, for sure. I had not seen it in clear text before like that. I had tried to read it out of the ancient scroll, and yeah, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to read. I didn't when I saw that note, I didn't skip to Appendix A, but then later, I don't mean to jump in either, but when he talks about Anderson's, I did go back and look at the Appendix B, and I did read some of that, and I had some of those discussions to bring to my last night to my Saturday night discussion with lodge guys last night to talk about. So, but there's also some things I'm looking forward to when we get to that to think, well, why aren't we doing that, or why do we do this, or yeah, it'll be interesting to get to that, and we could always at some point too if we wanted to pause and after chapter 2 and go back and read those things. But we were originally discussing just going through it. I don't know at the end if we're going to have the steam to go through 10 or 12 pages of the manuscript and dissect it.
Old English language, yeah.
But we'll see it. I'll be curious to read it in depth and see how it does align with our modern ideals of what we think Freemasonry is or supposed to be.
All right. So after going through the Regis manuscript, he goes on to talk about well, he sort of has as David said earlier, sort of a begats thing of of English history in the 1700s, and gets into the Renaissance and into having repeated wars over Protestantism and Catholicism, or between Protestants and Catholics, I guess, in England, which may or may not have given rise to the importance of the Masonic Lodge as a place where such things are not discussed.
And the Irish and the Scots just kind of said, "Hey, keep us out of it."
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, have you guys ever had any religious discussion in your lodges? I guess it depends on how you define religious discussion.
I can't offhand recall. Nothing, certainly nothing in open lodge. I mean, religion comes up as a subject with your brethren, sort of off the property quite frequently, but nothing ever directly. Although I don't ever remember a time when it was sort of we were reminded in lodge either that was something we weren't supposed to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It made me think of, I mean, I acknowledge it's been a prohibition in lodges for a long time, and that's a good thing. But in my lodge, oh gosh, it must have been 5-7 years ago, we had a minister come and speak about the different words for love in the Bible in the original text, and comparing it to as we use charity in our ritual as it was as it is in the King James version of the Bible, and there's all the original words for love, for brotherly love, and for the agape unconditional love, and for erotic love, and that sort of stuff, all just become love in our version. And so we was a sort of a talk about that, which wasn't at the time. I thought this was really cool, and then once in a while I think, oh, just talk. And anyway, I'm way off topic, aren't I? I'm sorry.
No, I think it's neat to consider what can we talk about and not talk about, and what was happening in this Renaissance, and trying to figure out who was the authority to be able to talk and not to talk, and what they could say or couldn't say, and what was the truth and not the truth. And it does kind of fascinate me now that why can't we talk about some of these things? We're supposed to all be on the level and all supposed to be open and honest with each other, and isn't this the perfect place to talk about some of those things in theory? Because if I disagree with you, I should be able to rationalize that disagreement and not explode and be upset. I should also listen to what your ideas are, and hopefully listen to my ideas, and we can maybe come to some middle ground or not. Or, I don't like the idea of agreeing to disagree. I've never liked that idea, because that just means that I'm still in my camp and you're still in your camp to some extent, and not coming to some understanding of why we all have different opinions about things. Nobody's right all the time, but
I wonder if this is almost a situation where history repeats itself somewhat, because you mentioned earlier, talking about was this perhaps the late Gothic, early Renaissance, or if I'm mashing my ears together too closely, was at a time when as you had Protestantism developing, you had the printing press, you had the vernacular language used in church services. Technology was changing, society was changing, so Freemasons started to become perhaps a little more secret to protect their lot in life. And it's almost like we're going through something like that now. When I joined Lodge, the internet was just in its infancy, and now when I've come back to Lodge, we're podcasting, we're texting one another, we're transmitting ritual by email, and there's so much about what we do that's out there and seen by so much of the world. So, are we looking at history repeating itself again and again?
Yeah, and the have incidents in British Columbia. I know recently, with lodges being burned down, or temples being burned down, and there's actually a guy around here who's we get emails periodically that he's been issuing threatening emails about the Masons in Washington, and that we should be on the lookout for him and that sort of stuff. So I feel like there is some of that on the rise, like whether that's Masonic related specifically, or that's just, at least in the United States, what I perceive as a growing intolerance of people who have a differing opinion of your own. Yeah. I don't know, but either way, it's something to be aware of.
Well, it's just funny from a personal, I'll just make a personal comment about that, because I attended Lodge meetings in 2 of those buildings that were burned down. And I knew I knew a longtime member, actually a former police chief with one of the local with one of the local departments in Vancouver, who had been a previous master of the 3rd building that was burned down. It was actually, I thought about it quite a bit. I wasn't active at that point, but it was I also was looking around for new opportunities in my personal life for things, and then it made me really think and consider about getting active in the craft again. That was a really that was a horrible incident, and the person who was the perpetrator of it eventually admitted to a news organization that he had substance abuse issues, and an awful lot of his misunderstandings about the subject had come off of reading wacky stuff on the internet about Freemasonry. So that's it was quite a tragic episode up here.
And just to clarify, you said that was about the time you were thinking about coming back to Masonry. Did that make you more interested in coming back, or did it make you go, I don't want to do that?
No, I was it moved me the other way. I was quite, I'd really like to I'd really like to step back into it and do what I can to help, so to speak, because I didn't have much of an idea of how strong, what the strength of the craft was at that point, and I didn't until I actually started attending the lodge again.
Strong enough to be controlling the world along with our lizard people overlords, but you know.
I don't know. I sometimes think Chat GPT might put paid to all of that, but we'll see. I'm not. I'm far away from that kind of thing in my working life. So we'll see we'll see where it goes. As there's an old Chinese saying that says, may you live in interesting times, and it's not always meant to be complimentary. So. We'll see where this all goes.
I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. David, did you have any other final? I mean, we've gotten all the way up to like whatever the cathedral era. I don't even think that we made a whole lot of progress. I guess we got it to the Regis poem.
Yeah, I think we're kind of crossing over into the area from building buildings to now building men, the speculative masons part. I think so. Maybe that's a good place to segue from the buildings to men.
Fair enough. So with that, if we're always happy to hear from our listeners, if you have any thoughts or well, not criticisms, obviously, because no one other than positive ones, but there's nothing to criticize here. But if you have any thoughts on the subject matter or on our delivery of it, we're happy to hear from you on the various platforms. And we look forward to talking to you again soon here on the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.